tonight for an important conversation about housing and service experiencing homelessness in the unincorporated communities of San Diego County. My name is Lisa Stewart, co-chair of the Casa de Oro Alliance's Government Affairs Committee, and I will be your moderator tonight. The Government Affairs Committee works to develop relationships with government entities and elected officials. We track legislation affecting issues we are concerned about, and our committee learns more about the challenging issues that our community faces so that we can help bring those to the attention of the Alliance and bring everybody up to speed. So tonight we have invited Omar Passons, Director of San Diego County's Department of Integrated Services, who will run tonight's listening session. Mr. Passons is conducting listening sessions throughout the month of May and in early June to get community input to help inform the county's framework for the goal of permanent homes with services for people experiencing homelessness. So tonight, we want to hear from you as to what the County of San Diego should consider when locating housing facilities and support services for unhoused people living in areas of the unincorporated county, like Casa de Oro. So this session will be recorded so that we can capture everyone's comments. And we are also live streaming on Facebook and our website. So if you are watching us on live stream, please type your questions or comments in the chat feature. And Dustin Bennett, our awesome tech support tonight, will pick them up and share them with me and with Omar. And if you are in our Zoom meeting, please mute yourself until I call on you to share your comments. You can either raise your hand, old school, right? Or you can use the raise hand feature on our Zoom. So please help me welcome Omar Passons. Omar, it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I'm thankful for the opportunity. We, as a county staff that are here to present it, I've got a couple of colleagues who are here, Bridget Cooper and Zuleika Rosa, who are both very committed members of our team that work day in and day out on issues related to helping people who experience homelessness. I mention also that we're joined by a colleague from our Planning and Development Services Department. I see that Lynette Tessitore is here as well. And so if there are questions that come up that are specific to zoning or how somebody can use their property as it relates to these topics, I may use that. What's that old TV show where you grab a lifeline? You ask for a lifeline. I might do that in those cases. So what I'd like to do is share my screen, and then I've got a short presentation that I'll want to sort of pinch down a little bit, because most of what we want to do is to engage and hear from you. And if it's possible, if you don't mind muting, I think that'll help everybody just be able to hear. Our intention is to engage you as members of the community about what you think about what the county should consider in terms of where to locate facilities, support, and services. So I'm going to just quickly share my screen. When I'm done, I'm going to unshare the screen so that we can see each other. It's as close as we can get to an in-person conversation. So, and there will be, most of this time will be your questions, your feedback, your thoughts, and my responses. So even though it's going to be me talking a bit right up front. So a couple of Zoom etiquette pieces. Thankfully, we've got Lisa as well from your organization moderating. We're grateful to be guests and to be able to be here to provide some input and get your feedback. There's a raise hand feature. There's the chat function. As Lisa mentioned, Dustin will be monitoring for your comments and questions as we go along. One thing I just, to be respectful of each other and the time, the meeting, as I understand it, is an hour. And so we want to make sure that everyone who wants to say something can, and understanding, so if you can keep your comments as concise as possible, your questions as concise as possible, it's appreciated. This won't be the last opportunity. It happened that you had a meeting coming up and we were doing this. And so I said, well, can I join in? And you're gracious, Bob and team were gracious enough to say yes. So there'll be plenty of time to answer. There'll be other sessions moving forward. There's no scenario where we want to limit your chance to communicate on this. what's happening? What's going on? On April 6th, our Board of Supervisors took really decisive action. They directed us as staff. I'm a County of San Diego employee, as are my colleagues, and they directed us as staff to do a couple of things. The part that involves the Health and Human Services Agency was to go out to the community and engage the community, all of the community, people who live in homes, people who own homes, rent homes, people who experience homelessness right now. We have had staff already engaging members of the community who are living in various services agency, outdoor locations. Go out to the community to make sure, and frankly, because as we're getting engagement, all of the community, we want people options that homes, people will use so that they'll actually get the help and support necessary. So they directed us to do that. And they said, get this information. And I think one of the things I always like to be really upfront with, sometimes you go to these meetings and it can be frustrating, right? Because you give your opinion or your thought and you say, and then that's not the thing that happens. And so it gets real frustrating. It feels like nobody's listening. And so I always just want to say that this is part of the feedback and part of the process for developing a framework. And there's at least two reasons for that. One is, there may be two people, even in this very call, where one person says, you know what, I think all of these facilities, they should all be on a church or a mosque or a synagogue. That's the only place in our community that would be appropriate. And then there might be somebody else in the call who says, well, no, I think that it should be anywhere but a church, a mosque, and a synagogue. Well, as you can imagine, we can't do both of those things. They're mutually exclusive, right? So for one of the reasons not every single piece of feedback will be in the framework is that sometimes those things conflict. And that's just the sort of the reality of living in a complicated society with different viewpoints. The other thing that is part of the reason that we can't is that there are other factors that come to play, like geographic factors, right? The County of San Diego only has control in certain parts of the county. So it couldn't choose. If somebody said, well, I think they should all be in some city. Well, the county doesn't have control over the decisions that cities make about their land use. There's also expertise issues, right? You want people with behavioral health expertise or physical health expertise or who spend their time really researching evidence-based practices and things like that to weigh in on those processes as well. So the community input is part of what we look for. This slide is not going to be surprising to anybody who is part of your alliance, right? This is just the unincorporated county. We added this slide, and I'm sorry that it's so small. There will be a larger one on the website, which was shared in the link earlier, so that you can read it all. But we added this because part of the thing that the Board of Supervisors did was essentially say, issues of homelessness are regional. They're region-wide. They affect you whether you live in Ramona or Spring Valley or downtown San Diego or you name it, right? So everybody has a role and a thought and a care about the issues, but this is about what the county can do with regard to its zoning ordinance amendments, and that only applies in the unincorporated area. So that's why I just wanted to put that slide up. It's not, the supervisors have all been very clear that they care about addressing homelessness across the entire county, but this particular issue is focused on the unincorporated, the ordinance and locations in the unincorporated area. So one other thing I always want to make sure to just say to folks right up front is it's just, the solution to homelessness, there are many, but at its core, it's a combination of a permanent home and appropriate services for people who need them, right? Not everybody who becomes homeless or has an experience of homelessness needs a full suite of services. And some people who have an experience of homelessness need lots of services over a long period of time. And so, and we understand that having a house is different from being in a tent or being in a shelter or being in a parking lot or anything else. And so I say that just to make sure everyone watching really understands that we as an enterprise understand that you don't solve homelessness with a tent. That's not a house. but also there are things that we do need to try to solve for: keeping people safe, making sure that the sort of, communities are clean, and that we're dealing with security issues. All of those kinds of things are important right away. And so we're saying, let's walk and chew gum at the same time. Let's provide, safety and security and those immediate needs that people need, while also working towards the long-term solution. And so, excuse me. So this is what's going to happen over the next 5 minutes, and then we'll break, and I've got some questions that I'd just like to ask, or I won't break, but I'll put up some questions and then hear from you, and we'll kind of go back and forth. These next several slides are just pictures. They're real world examples from actual locations, either in San Diego or in California or sometimes elsewhere, that are not, the county isn't saying this is exactly what's going to happen. They're not endorsed by staff or promoted by staff. They're just offered to get our minds going, right, and to facilitate some conversation. And then I want to be clear that the focus is on meeting people where they are, and on ultimately getting people into sort of permanent homes with services. The reality of choice is that some things will be right for some people and not right for others. And if our goal is to help get people off the street and into ultimately a permanent housing solution that works for them with the services that are necessary, that involves recognizing that issue. Okay. And I want to just one other thing before we start into those: all of the options that we talk about would include access to key services, right? So those, and that's a range of things, again, depending on an individual person's needs. There's no scenario where the board has directed us to just go do one component of a very complicated issue. I really want to make sure folks know that. If you're just joining in, my name is Omar Passons. I work with the County of San Diego's Health and Human Services Agency, and we're just going through some preparation slides. There will be other opportunities, not just this session with this your alliance, but also with additional engagement sessions. I'll put up an email and information at the end where you can email, you can text, you can do voicemail. We really want to make it as easy as possible for you to have your voice heard, to share your thoughts, and it'll help us, frankly, do our work better. So now let's look at some of these photos. So this is, when we talk about emergency shelter, a lot of times what comes to people's mind is a big building, big open building with a bunch of rows and rows of cots, right? I think that's what an emergency shelter is. Well, we're looking at an emergency shelter right now. It just happens to be what's called non-congregate shelter, where there's individual units that people have, and so they can have some space for themselves. And for some people, that's a better dynamic, because maybe something bad happened in one of those congregate or big sort of multi-bed settings that didn't work out so well. There are all sorts of reasons. So we try to meet people where they are. So this is one example. Here's another. Again, these are actual examples. This slide deck will be available on the site that I put on it has a LiveWell SD extension. We'll have these up tomorrow morning, or by tomorrow morning, or sometime tomorrow, so that folks can see them themselves again if you want to, or if you didn't get a chance, or you have some friends who weren't here and they want to know what's going on. This is another example. These pallet structures. This is just a company that makes these units that were actually designed by people with lived experience of homelessness. They're obviously they don't look the same as the previous slides. They take a little bit less time to get into place. They are in use in a variety, I think something like 20 places up and down the coast, including Riverside, which is a nearby location. So again, the county is not endorsing one thing or another in having us do this presentation. It's just giving the community some food for thought, some ability to engage. And as a reminder, in about 3 minutes or so, I'll unshare, and then we'll be able to just sort of chat and hear from folks. So it won't be me talking the full hour, I promise you that. This is another example. It's one of the things that this example always reminds me to let people know is that, all of you are part of a group, right? You're part of a group that provides community. And I think sometimes we can forget that that's a pretty human instinct to want community. And so when we're thinking about how do we help address issues for people who are experiencing homelessness, part of that helping address is recognizing how to help establish community, how to create a circumstance where people can feel, even at a short basis and then ultimately longer, connection. So I just, as we move to safe parking and safe camping, right? That's another type of emergency option that is not intended to solve the actual experience of homelessness. It's intended to solve, security, safety, a place that's potentially secure. This is a lot in San Diego right now. And it actually has a shower opportunity. It closes at night so that it's secure. They have some safety mechanisms and things of that sort. And I share this just because part of what the board is considering, and part of the sort of ordinance questions, is whether to expand the definitions to enable safe parking. And as you're thinking about your community, surrounding communities, thinking about what would be the types of places, what would be the considerations that we should use in deciding whether to have safe parking in terms of where the locations are. One of the things that you may think about, you may have an opinion about, is some of these types of safe parking, they're only available for a fixed time, like 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. or something. And some in other places, I don't think any in our county, but some are available longer. And the pros and cons, you might imagine, is, well, if you have a car and you have to go find some other place to stash it all day, that can create its own problems, right? So now you're parking on some street somewhere and it's less secure. The flip side is maybe you spend a lot of time in that safe parking when it's supposed to be a temporary solution. So those are just things that for the community to consider. And we'll get a chance, as I said, to weigh in. And I'll ask you about all of these types of options. These next two slides, again, are not things that the county is saying this should be in XYZ neighborhood or an XYZ community. It's just another example. This is a safe camping site that was set up in a city. As you can see, the tents, they all look the same because the municipality that did this actually just bought the tents to make sure they were of a certain quality and that kind of thing. And again, this doesn't solve the issue of homelessness, but it creates a space that has some safety to it. And if you add assessment services, because it isn't necessarily the case that everybody, no matter what we think about how somebody presents, it's not always the same issue, whether there's a health concern, physical or behavioral or mental, whether there's a physical disability. There's a much larger proportion of people experiencing homelessness who have physical disabilities or chronic health conditions. And so we just have to keep those things in mind as we're planning. Conversely, this is a sort of a more of a remote kind of area. And I think the thing that I just would mention to people thinking about, you may have read things from time to time that say, oh, well, we can just put them out in the distance or that kind of thing. We understand, I hear frequently from members of the community, well, there's got to be services, right? Like that's a frequent refrain. Like you can't just, and the further out you get, the more difficult it becomes to make sure that the services that people need are available, basic health services and that sort of thing. We're coming to the end. These are the last 3 slides, and there's some questions that I'll leave up for a little bit. This is actually an existing manufactured home structure. It's like a mini apartment complex that was manufactured offsite, and it's up in the Bay Area. And it took like from the time they finished, all the lawyers got finished with the contracts and all that kind of stuff. It basically took about 9 months to get done. So it's a much more, there are potentially significant impacts with regard to time and cost. Again, trade-offs, right? But I put this up as an example to say that transitional or interim or even permanent housing, it doesn't have to look the sort of any particular way. It's up to us as a community, and the county is part of the community. We all live in neighborhoods just like you do, to work together to try to understand what will be right for our community and in our community. And then here's a converted crate structure that's just, you know, another example of an option that just to jog our minds. Now here's a set of questions, and you don't have to memorize all the text. I will make a point to ask as soon as I shut this down, and I'll defer to Lisa at that point. But if there were emergency shelter or safe parking or safe camping in the community, what do we think it should look like, and where might it go? What are the factors we should consider? If you can think of specific locations for any of these things in your community, in adjacent communities, maybe you used to live in another community and you have thoughts about that, that's okay too. As I said, the board has said that this is a region-wide issue, and so we're taking all of the input that we can. If you do provide a private location, I just want you to know, we'll take it and write it down, and we'll go internally and consider it. I won't be able to make an opinion while we're on this meeting about a private location, and there's two reasons for that. It's not that I'm trying to be coy. We're not being secret squirrel or anything. It's just there are two very practical reasons. One is, it's like they're your taxpayer dollars, and as soon as somebody knows that their place might be something that the government is going to buy using that $12 billion I just mentioned, all of a sudden the price changes, right? And so if we're trying to be respectful of your dollars as taxpayers, one of the things we've got to do is not, you know, kind of tip the hand a little bit. But there's another reason that just relates to, there are rules around certain types of property. And if there are people living there, there are rules that can trigger additional expenses and mandatory costs on the part of the government entity. And so we just really want to be careful. So I'll write them down, we'll take notes, and we'll talk about them internally. But if you raise a private location, just know we won't be able to share. So what I'm going to do now is close down the screen and just engage a little bit. So I'm going to stop the share here. There we go. Okay. And I guess I would ask the question of Lisa, how you would like to handle taking questions.
Okay, so Dustin, if you can change the screen so that I can, it's the gallery view. That way I'll be able to see people's hands. And folks that are on the Zoom, if you use the raise hand feature, if you'll see like Alan did, then your screen goes to the very front and it makes it easier for me to see. So
Lisa, one thing I'll say, just from the ones that I can see, I know there's somebody whose name isn't there, but with regard to cleaning up the apartments and drugs on South Barcelona. And what I would say is we do get input during these community processes that we have to make sure to circle back with our colleagues in the Sheriff's Department and let them know if there are illegal behaviors going on that require law enforcement intervention. That's part of our obligation, is to make sure that they're aware. What we're trying to do also, though, to be just very direct about it, is to add the types of supports that will provide an alternative for people, and whether that's an alternative location in terms of a place to be, or in some cases people will choose that they no longer that they want to address a health condition that they may have. So I just want to take that one, and then I'll turn it over to you because I can't see further up.
Okay, perfect. So I've got just a reminder on the first slide, one of the first slides that Omar shared. Just be mindful of the conciseness of your comments, because we do have a half an hour and we'd like for as many people as possible to be able to share. And I will call on Alan. You've got your hand raised.
So my question or my statement is I deal with or interact with homeless people in and around the El Cajon area because that's where my office is at. And they don't want housing. They don't want to live in housing. They like it the way they have it. And I've interviewed several of these people, and they don't want to meet the parameters. They don't want to do anything for any of it, and they would rather stay on the street. So how are you going to force these people to go into the housing once you spend all these millions of dollars for housing?
So there's a couple things that I'll say in response to that. Even though this session is focused on getting people's opinions and thoughts about where various services and housing should be, I do recognize that questions like that come up about, do people do or don't want a certain type of housing or intervention. And I would say a couple things. One is, there are going to be people who say, exactly as you have mentioned, Alan, hey, I don't want your help. I don't want to talk. Don't bother me. For all of the people, for some of those people, and I'm thinking about experiences I've personally had and my staff has had with people, they may say no the first 40 times. Maybe something bad happened for whatever reason, right? Our job is to not accept the first or the fifth or the 10th or the 20th or the 30th no, and build the trust to make a difference. Now, I understand. Now, here's the thing. That answer may be unfulfilling for some, but it's the truth, right? That there are some people who experience homelessness who say no initially, and then they change their mind and say yes. There are some people who experience homelessness who say, you know what? I wasn't ready, or I didn't want it, or I couldn't take my pet, or a group setting didn't work for me, but this option works for me. And it isn't, I don't pretend, and this, just people who experience homelessness, I don't pretend to have a crystal ball here. There's lots of evidence out there that some things work for some people, and our job as a government entity that hears from members of the public like you and members of the public who are experiencing homelessness and says, we need help. We need people to do something. And so Alan, to your question, it's not clear that it's going to be a solution for every person who's on the street. And yet, I think we still need to attempt to help as many people as we can. And I think that's what the board's direction is. And so we're trying to come to you as a community for input on what are the types of locations that will work. Lisa, I'll go back to you.
All right, thank you. There's a couple of comments in the chat, but I also know that Tracy Allen has had her hand up for a while, so I will call on you, Tracy.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And I just want to say, first of all, that the slides, those were really nice. I hadn't even pictured any housing for the homeless like that. So that's really nice. And I hope we can figure out where to put these places to allow people to live. The question I have is really, and I apologize, it's really kind of off topic, but I'm over here in the Casa de Oro area, and I'm right above where there's a marijuana facility. And I'm just wondering, what can I do to ask, like when people come through here 1, 2, 3 in the morning and they're playing their music super, super loud, is there anything that we can do about that?
So Tracy, thank you for asking me that question. I've gotten that question from actually other people on this call right now in past meetings. And what I told them, even though I'm not the law enforcement or the code enforcement people, is like, I do work for the county government. And so I know the people that you need to talk to. And so I just put my email in the chat. And so rather than saying, hey, go to so-and-so or call this number or whatever, just email me directly. And either I or one of my staff will reach out to our colleagues in code enforcement, which are the people that come out and say, hey, this is not legal. You can't do this here. And then if that doesn't work, then they get the extra folks in to shut them down. So I guess, Tracy, that's what I would say is it's, there's no perfect thing, but in terms of our system and the way that it works, if you will email me in the morning when I get up, or maybe even tonight, depending on how tired I am at 7, we'll get the code enforcement individual connected, because if you're talking about an illegal business, there's a recourse for that.
Okay, I appreciate it, because I know that, you know, the sheriff had been out and they explained that, you know, even though it's illegal, their hands are tied, so on and so forth. So it's like, okay, whatever. Can we at least have something where the people cannot just come up and play the music super loud all hours of the day and night? So yeah, I'll email you. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that, Tracy. And it would be good to know, if you don't mind putting in the chat, if you know the department that you talked to that said, hey, there's nothing we can do. I know there's other folks who want to comment, but when you email me, if you could let me know that. We would like, honestly, to have that conversation. You know, if somebody says that, you know, we want to know who it was so we can talk to them, even our own colleagues. You know, I don't know anybody among us who's perfect, so that'll be good. So
I will do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Well,
Thanks, Tracy.
I can speak to that real quick if you'd like me to.
Oh, hey, look at that.
Yes.
That'd be okay, Lisa?
It was in my title who I was, but maybe it just didn't stretch across the screen. Hi, Tracy. I think I've talked to the smaller group about that before, and I'd be happy to discuss with you offline if you like. So I'll put my my email in there as well, and I can get you that information.
All
Okay,
right.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Captain Evans. Appreciate it. Glad to see you on the call. All right. Okay, Tracy, if you wouldn't mind taking your hand down, that would be awesome. And then the next person who has their hand raised is iPhone Von Ute. And I apologize, or Ute. I apologize if I pronounced it wrong.
Thank you for asking the community about our input. I have worked with the homeless people, so I think we cannot put all unsheltered people over. And I mean, they're just like us. It's just the population. Some people are into drugs, some people are families, some people are victims of domestic violence. So I think it's different people who needs different housing. And Omar said that already. I just wanted to keep that in mind before I even speak more. And I wanted to keep in mind that in the whole America, we are actually busing homeless people around from one state to the other. So a lot of people, especially downtown, they're actually not from San Diego, they're from Phoenix, they're from Chicago, they're from New York. And San Francisco started a program, it's called the Homebound program, where they're paying pass tickets back for people to go back and that's important, if they have a place to go, if people take care of them, and if they have housing. And I think that needs.
I apologize for jumping in. I just also want to be really sensitive to the whole group. So if you've got a question, I'd love to get it. I just want to make sure that folks.
My question is the zoning where you want to put this, because you said you cannot use private property. I think nothing needs to go to Casa de Oro. It's a very fragile neighborhood and there's a lot of racial inequity. And I think children need to get more resources and land. And I think that really needs to be considered. I like the swap meet area. It's not Casa de Oro. I like the swap meet area because they have the library there. They have a park there. They have family health centers there. They are there already. And there's a lot of land in the back, which actually belongs to the county. So that would be perfect. I don't know why I go to Casa de Oro.
Thank you very much for that. I will just mention, just to clarify, in case anybody else had this, I didn't mean to say that you shouldn't suggest private property. You can, if you have some in mind, you should say wherever the locations are, we'll sort it out. I just want to make sure you know that if I don't respond to the issue, it's not that I'm not paying attention. There's some limitations. So thank you very much. We'll go to the next one, Lisa.
Okay, right. I don't know your name. All I know is it's iPhone. So, but I would like to call on you.
I have an iPhone. I don't know if it's me. This is Lydia
Yes.
Chang.
Hi,
Okay.
Lydia. Yes, it's you.
Hi. Well, the homeless people is such a huge problem, and the solutions that Omar is showing us, I mean, they're wonderful solutions, but when are these solutions going to happen? I mean, it just seems like they could be very long-term projects, and in the meantime, we seem to be having more and more homeless people.
Yeah.
So I wonder, I mean, this might be a very, very simplistic solution, but when I see homeless people, the problem with homeless people is not that they're, people. The problem is that, they don't have a place to take a shower. They don't have bathrooms to go to. They don't have places to put things away. So in a short term, is there a way to give them, decent bathrooms and showers and places to put things so that they can walk around and look like all of us? And at least, it's not such
Lydia,
a visible problem.
Lydia, I appreciate that. And I just would, I'm curious to ask if there are locations or types of things that you think the county should consider. And it's not specific to Casa de Oro. I'm here at the Casa de Oro Alliance, and I'm happy to take some requests or information in your community. But like I said, you're just as entitled to have an opinion about another community. So in my view, if you have those as well. So Lydia, do you have anything in mind, any particular locations or types of locations?
I think that if you could think of something attractive, that you could put these facilities behind, attractive walls or buildings, when people would not be seeing a lot of congregation of homeless, people with all their belongings, having not taken a shower for a month, etc. That if you can make it pleasant enough, you can put them anywhere.
Thank you, Lydia. Lisa, I want to flag both Bill H. and Tom. Tom had a comment in the chat that I couldn't see because it moved too fast, and Bill has been raising his hand. So I just want to make sure that we get to those two.
Okay, so Bill, let's go ahead and call on you. You've got your hand raised.
You just have to unmute, Bill. Oh, that's too bad. Bill, we can't hear you. Oh, that's a bummer. Why don't we go to Tom and maybe come up? There we go.
Hello?
Yes. Oh.
Okay. To be succinct, a couple of points were that there should be some parameters here. And one, I think, is that there's no negative impact wherever a homeless situation is on the residents or businesses. And I think that should be one of the goals of whatever is put in. And then another is, I think it ought to be by public transportation points. I know that homeless people have approached me, and they needed money or they need to be driven to a public transportation point, or they needed a bus pass. And I think that ought to be offered so Bill, they can move around a different.
Yeah, Bill, let me ask you two questions. So I'm sorry, I didn't specify that I might ask you questions about your comments, but I want to make sure that I sort of clarify. On the first question about the negative impacts on residents or businesses, do you have something in mind when you say that? Like, what constitutes a negative impacts for you?
Offered so they can move around a different. I think it would be similar to doing an environmental impact. There's always going to be a trade-off. So I think the model has already been established. You just move it from environmental into the people-to-people impact. And we can discuss that offline if you like, because we only have so much time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I made a note. I would be happy to engage. I mentioned, just for everybody's awareness, that on the environmental side, there are I'm an attorney. There are whole case law books and treatises and all kinds of material on what those impacts and factors are that you consider. And so it's easier to point to. This would be a little more nuanced, but I would say, Bill, I'd be happy if you want to reach out afterwards so we can allow other folks. Lisa,
let's do that. Let's do that. There was two other points I wanted to make real quick.
Okay.
One is that it be zoned effectively, maybe at government facilities. And then the last is that it be cost effective. So it's not more expensive than renting out or putting in these Home Depot type of sheds. That's it.
I appreciate that. And just for everyone's awareness and context on the notion of what it means for something to be cost effective, right? If we were really gonna do this kind of budget, right, we would need to look at the totality of the expense, right? So not just the cost of the unit itself, but the utilities improvements, the offsite improvements, the grading, the ongoing operations and maintenance, the care and support services, like really everything, right? The replacement cost. And then we'd have to compare those to what is it costing now, right? Like, so it's very easy to say, wow, man, this unit is 2,000. There's another one for 1,000. This is not cost effective. Well, you have to put that 2,000 in the context of all the other additional costs of that to other parts of the system. So that's just something for folks to have as, no, Bill,
I totally agree.
I hear you. I just want to make sure, because there are other folks that might be common to you, but just so we all have a shared understanding.
Okay, thank you.
We'll talk about it offline.
Perfect.
Okay. So there were a couple of comments in the chat. John Putman said that I'm thinking of locations. Casadero is rather a small community, and anything beyond Campo Road would mean that a homeless housing would be in current neighborhoods. There were other, Tom Hyatt said, imagine that you have the perfect homes and the perfect areas. What will the county do to make sure folks are not living there long-term and the residents know it's a temporary assistance to get back on their feet? That's
a good question that we need to sort of take head on, right? Is that the emergency shelter as a term is actually defined in state law. And so to the extent that we're talking about things that are going to be for emergency uses, our colleagues I mentioned planning and development services, as part of those zoning ordinance amendments, are actually working with that law. So there isn't, for the emergency units, that will be sort of part of the stipulation. When you come in and you sign your piece to accept to be located there, and you get your, whatever it is, your tent, your parking space, your emergency unit, you know at the time, hey, this is not a permanent circumstance. And our job, part of the other thing the county did on April 6th was to start pushing towards more street outreach. So instead of having people where the homeless person, a person experiencing homelessness, has to go find somebody, the Board of Supervisors said, we're going to create a circumstance where there are more people, more social workers who are trained, more case managers going out to people and meeting them where they are on the street. So, which is just to say, part of that job is helping people get ready, not just for that emergency need, but for the longer term one. And when the board made that comment, your supervisor, Supervisor Anderson, actually said, hey, we want to make sure that this is something that's considered for our East County communities as well. And so part of what we're coming back to the board with is that answer as part of that memo. So, okay. So that's part of the ways.
Terrific. Thanks. Dennis, you've been waiting so patiently with your hand up in real person hand, the old school, and I'm just now seeing it. So thank you. You're on.
I think it's great that the county is trying to find places for the homeless people, especially in Casadero. I believe with an earlier comment, from Alan saying, we really don't have a place for them, kind of. I kind of agree with the same thing. We got Lamar Park, which is overrun. We just fought a battle, which we have not won, for the SPPs in El Cajon, which is about a mile from my house. Casa de Oro per se is not that large. We don't have an awful lot of open space. There's not an awful lot of places that you can put them. Right now, most of the homeless people are sleeping on the benches. They're down on Casa de Oro, and they're at Lamar Park. And if you're going to try and find some housing for them, what's it called, NIMBA? Not in my backyard. I don't want you putting them right across the street from me. And I don't think anybody else does either. So trying to identify a spot that you can find for the homeless people in Casa de Oro, I think is going to be quite a challenge. I just don't, my feeling is, I don't think we have the space to put them.
Okay. Thank you.
The one question I'd have for Dennis, just real quick, is have you been to Lamar Park lately? I just was on a call 2 days ago with another community group in Spring Valley, as it turns out, who had said last weekend they were at their they saw their first birthday party in Lamar Park in over a year, and she was talking about that her community group said that that there weren't folks camping in Lamar Park. So I wanted to check with you, Dennis, really quickly and see if that's something you've seen recently.
I have not been over there recently, but I can tell you that if you wait another week, they'll be right back again.
Well, okay, I appreciate that. We'll go to the next one. I'll tell you that has been there haven't been people sleeping in Lamar Park for at least 4 months. And so hopefully, I mean, look, we're trying to provide people with alternatives, and in the case of Lamar Park, it took over a year, but we were able to provide alternatives, including services where needed, to all of the people that came. So
you can talk to the captain. They kicked them out of the park. They put them on the street because they banned them from the park, but the county can't ban them from the street. So all they did was move out onto the street, and then they finally moved them along. And I'm telling you, take a week to 10 days, and they'll be back.
Yeah. So Lisa, I want to leave. Yeah. Make sure you have time to have more questions. But for the body of folks who are watching and those on Facebook, just understand that it was like our team oversaw the contractors and our colleagues and worked together with the Sheriff's Heart team. I can tell you that we were not kicking people out of the park. They were provided with services and options. And after lots and lots of work and repeat trips, we're able to help people use those options. So the County of San Diego is not in the effort of just kicking people out of places. So
right, and there's also the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court ruled that fining and jailing homeless people for staying outside or in unauthorized places if a bed at an emergency shelter is not available is unconstitutional. So it's the Eighth Amendment, which bars cruel and unusual punishment, prohibits punishing homeless people if there are more of them than there are available shelter beds, which I think is driving a lot of the conversation or the work that the county is trying to do to provide adequate shelters so that we can, through teams like Omar explained, to get them into housing. But right now we don't have housing. So it's this conundrum that we've been commenting on all night long in our call about what we don't like and what we don't like to see and where we don't want them to be. But let's, if in our last 8-9 minutes, if we can focus on maybe remembering those creative pictures that we saw on the slides that Omar shared, to really maybe remove ourselves from all the things we can't do or we don't want to see or we don't want it in our backyard, and just kind of put it out there with some possible locations, either in Casa de Oro or elsewhere.
And also, sorry, Lisa, I apologize. In addition, even if you don't have a location in mind, like one person mentioned thinking about transportation, right? It's an important thing for us to figure, how do people get to services that they need? That's a useful thing for us to be mindful of. Or even if you don't have specific ideas about locations, Casa de Oro or elsewhere, again, you have every right to have an opinion about other communities. So,
right. So I'm going to kind of do a round robin for, raise your hand if you want to just share some information, and there will be no judging. There will be no saying, oh, well, that's not a great idea. And here I'm going to start. I'm going to say, we do have something called the Crown Inn that is located next to a strip mall where supportive services could be located, and it's right on a bus line. And it's also right next to the 94 entrance. Whether that's a good or a bad location, it is a place where currently people are being housed, and that could be an option for services because it has some of the things that might be conducive to helping people get off the street, temporary housing, transitional housing, and get them where they need to be.
Thanks for that.
Sure. Anybody else? Raise your hand or click on your raised hand feature if you want to share something. Cindy. Cindy, you're on mute.
We had heard a while back that they were planning to build some facilities across from Rancho San Diego that I believe is owned by the Water District. It's on the, I'm kind of challenged with directions, but it's on Old 94, basically, I think on the west side. And I'm wondering if, and that to us seemed like the perfect location because there's a lot of space. There's not a community of homeowners. There's transportation, and there are options for work and training, and it just seemed like that would be a good location to me. And I also wrote down my other ideas, the park and rides, if you had some small, maybe 8 or 10 unit places like the congregate ones you showed, or the under the overpasses. There's lots of time, a lot of space, open space in those areas.
Okay, thank you, Cindy.
If anybody happens to know, based on Cindy's description, where she was talking about, and you can drop it in the chat, that would be great. The one by the Rancho San Diego facilities, just so that we know.
It's a shopping center. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Others.
Alan, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, I do, and thank you for calling on me again. Hey, I was just looking at the map, overhead map, and looking the southwest side of Sweetwater Reservoir has quite a bit of open space. It's inside the community where services can be easily accessible, possibly right off the 125. It's not quite the Spring Valley Swap Meet area, which is over off of Quarry Road. It's just a little bit further to the southwest of the reservoir itself. That looks like it's wide open area.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Alan. And you can go ahead and put your hand down so I don't keep looking at it going, wait, Alan has his hand up. Another thought I just had while you were talking is there's not far from the Crown Inn is what used to be a tennis court, and that could possibly be anyway. That's what used to be the tennis courts on that area that's vacant, not being used. That's again accessible to services. Bill, you've got your hand up. And we got to, yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I had to figure it out. I'm wondering if the county planning department that already knows planning, zoning, land use can be tapped, and they probably have been, but it seems like they would be a source of potential sites that were zoned correctly, and maybe the county tax assessor and tax collector looking at foreclosed properties.
You know, Bill's point brings up something that I probably should just let folks know. So you're absolutely right. And as it turns out, we've had extensive conversations with our planning and development services and our Department of General Services about like the breadth of various locations. But what the Board of Supervisors wanted us to do, and the reason that we're here and having these other sessions, is that in addition to our own internal expertise, they really want to make sure that we have like paid attention to local expertise, to neighborhood level expertise. And again, as I said, it doesn't have to be Casa de Oro. You might find yourself like, hey, I used to live in, I don't know, some other community, and this is a potential option there. On the issue of places that are out in sort of open spaces or what have you, one of the things that I would just let folks know to be mindful of, and I am mindful of the time, Lisa, so I'll make this quick and just say,
You're good.
I mentioned earlier, we were having a conversation about running utilities and plumbing and all the different requirements that exist, and the environmental considerations for certain places where there's undisturbed land. So just know if you've made a suggestion, or as we move this forward, we are taking all of these things into account. I'm a former construction and land use attorney and spent plenty of time thinking about and mulling around those issues. And so it is part of what we're thinking about. But we want to make sure not to overlook the community itself. So that's part of this one. All right, Lisa.
Okay. I'm looking at my screens, plural, and I'm not seeing any hands. One of the things, and if it's okay if I say this, Omar, and feel free to join in, sometimes when we see problems in our community, we make assumptions that the entire homeless population looks like that person who's on the bench. And the more we learn about homelessness, what I'd like for you to do, I'm giving you all a homework assignment, is over the next week, maybe 2 weeks, as you're driving around your community, kind of look at places in your community in a different way. Look at them from the perspective of a mom and her kids who are spending the night in a car because they don't have a home anymore. The mom is still employed. The kids are in school, but they're living in their car. I can't think of any other example because I know a mom and her kids who are homeless and live in a car. And the struggle is, where do you do your laundry? Where do you get a shower? Where do your kids get showers? So open your minds to thinking about people who are without housing, to beyond, I think his name is Steve, who camps out in the entrance to the Casadero area and has a tent now that's moved over next to CVS. That's one example. And I think several of you talked about examples of, I think it was iPhone Utra that talked about working with homeless people. Not that, so my homework assignment for you is to drive around your community and think about answers to the questions that Omar has asked. Where would be some safe designated places where people could sleep and get services or to get showers? Are there churches in your area or mosques or synagogues that you know of that already do provide maybe temporary shelters as part of the Interfaith Shelter Network? And ask them what they thought, because they've worked with some folks. Our church hosts that for 2 weeks. Can you imagine being a person that lives in one church for 2 weeks, and then you pack up your stuff and then you go to another religious institution and live there for 2 weeks, and then you go to another place for another 2 weeks. In the meantime, you are getting services, you're being helped with some training and things like that. But wouldn't it be great if there could be a temporary housing shelter? And imagine if you have kids and you're moving to all these different places around the county. Your kids probably aren't in the same school over and over again. So if we think about solutions in that capacity with some safe emergency places where they can sleep and get showers and do laundry, also some emergency homeless shelter situations, and then also transitional housing. Is that helpful, Omar, for me to give them a homework assignment to kind of think about it that way and then get back with you now that they've had an opportunity to listen and kind of think?
So I'll say, so 2 things I'll say. One is I'm a guest at the CDO Alliance meeting. So if homework assignments is something that is a normal part of your program, hey, that's entirely up to you. I will say that we will welcome your input later tonight, tomorrow, next week, next month. We signed up in our office and my colleagues in Health and Human Services Agency, we signed up for the job because we want to help make a difference. We want to help people have a life with dignity. We want to help people enjoy their neighborhood, enjoy their front yard, be able to go to the park, all the things that different people want to do. So you have a right to give your input. You have a right to continue to be heard. And so I put a book in the chat that is very well researched. I've actually read it and clicked through to the citations for the things that we know work for those that might be interested. And I would just say, Lisa, we are grateful that you made space for us to come and chat, and you have more opportunities. This is not a one and done deal, because here's the thing. Even when we get to actually doing something like some other additional pieces, we need the community to be part of that conversation as well. It may not be exactly what you want, exactly where you want, but it's still part of your community. And whether that's the neighboring community or your specific, it's still part of where you shop and live. And so I really, we're not going to be right on everything with every person on every time, but it's our job to be forthright about it and try to work together. So thank you very much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So any last minute questions before we close?
Oh,
Yes.
sorry, real quickly. I just, so one of the things you may have noticed if you're going on some parts of the highway, the interstate, is on the like embankments or up on the edges, they're starting to see like more people. And so I know that some communities are trying to figure out how they're going to address those. We in our department are working with National City, Chula Vista, City of San Diego in the South Bay communities, and with La Mesa and El Cajon and Santee, and why do I always do this? Lemon Grove, sorry, Lydia. To try to have solutions that are not just, just Spring Valley or just, whatever, but shared solutions for those areas. And so we don't yet have, they're not fully in place, they're still in process. But I wanted to leave folks knowing, whether it's National City, as one question came in, or others, that we're trying to work at sub-regional levels as well to create solutions so that whether the person is here today and maybe 2 miles over the next day, that there are reserved locations for people. So it's a process. It takes a long time, but I wanted to let folks know that we're really working to try to change things.
All right, fantastic. And you all know you have Omar's email address. If you think of things and want to share with him, we will also post it to the Castadero Alliance's website, so that there are going to be, you'll have opportunities to follow up. John Putman said we also need to know demographics of the homeless population, and those are all really good questions. And I think the Government Affairs Committee of the Castadero Alliance will be posting some of that information onto our Castadero Alliance website. If you all find some resources that you think are great, please let us know. You can always email that. We have a contact form on our website, and you can always post a comment in on our Facebook page, so that we can keep going, keep the momentum moving.
Lisa, one other quick thing,
Yes.
is there is an organization called the Regional Task Force on the Homeless. And most people only ever hear about the one night count, and they say, oh, this is not representative. Well, it's only one night, so it's not really possible to be representative, and that's supposed to be a floor. So they do a count once a year. I just put a link to other data. They actually have a really robust other data about daily visits and about where the housing inventory for shelters and other types is right now. So I share that. That's like the regional lead for broad homeless policy. And so we're working with them and with others. But I wanted to share that because a lot of people don't know that there's more than just the one night count on a Wednesday night or something. So
perfect. Or
again,
Wednesday.
Thank you very much.
Wednesday in the morning. So thank you to Brian Nevins, Captain Nevins, for joining us tonight. We appreciate your support and being here, and for all of you actually for giving up your evening and joining us on this important topic. Stay tuned. Our next General Assembly is July the 15th. We meet on the third Thursdays of every odd month at 6 p.m. And if you have any ideas of what you would like to learn about or talk about, feel free to email us or contact us on the Casa de Oro Alliance website, casadeoro.org, and we would be happy to entertain those. Tracy said that's your birthday. Well, Tracy, we already know now what we're going to do at that assembly meeting. We'll sing you happy birthday. So thank you, Omar, for being here. Thank you for the county staff, and everybody have a good evening.
Great job, Lisa. Great job.